All right, good evening. Welcome to Kopernik Observatory. It's great to see you all here this evening. My name is Drew Desker. I'm the director here. I want to welcome everybody here at Kopernik, as well as welcome those watching on our live stream, either watching us live or watching us, for us, it'll be in the future, when you tune in at some point in the future. Let's see here. It's great to see a couple of familiar faces and also some new faces, some young faces, and some experienced, we'll call them experienced faces here tonight. We love doing these Friday night programs. It's really an opportunity for people to start their sort of lifelong learning and continue it throughout their life. It's always a great opportunity, great thing for us to keep picking up new knowledge, and who knows where you're going to use that knowledge going forward. As a matter of interest, who's coming here for the first time? All right, very good. And who here are members? A good portion of the rest of you. All right, very good. Well, for those that just arrived, I always do a little talk about our membership. Kopernik, we're a nonprofit, and so it's events like this that, when you pay your admission. We do run summer camps. We run some school programs as well, but the membership does, in fact, certainly helps us out a lot. And what's particularly great about the Kopernik membership is that we belong to an association called the ASTC, Association of Science and Technology Centers. And with the Kopernik membership, you can get into over 350 other memberships. In fact, like a family membership for Kopernik is $75 for the year. So you get in any Friday night here, and also some special events. But also, you could take your membership and you can go to Roberson, you can go to the Franklin Institute, you can go down to the Intrepid. In fact, there's a gentleman here that more than saved his entire yearly membership here by just one visit to the Intrepid, because it would cost more for him and his family to have gone there than the year-long membership. Plus, you get to skip the long line of people walking in. So if you like this kind of place, Kopernik membership is actually quite valuable. As I said, we do our Friday night programs. We also do a lot of school outreach. We just had 60 kindergartners in here this earlier today, so that was a lot of fun. And we've got our summer camps that are coming up. We have some of them are already full. Others are getting full. And so if you've got a youngster that might be interested in spending a week up here, a fun week, hands-on in science and engineering, check out our website for that. One of the things that, again, with our Friday night programs we do is we've been doing these Friday night programs for decades, quite frankly. But back in 2020, we had to stop. In March of 2020, there was that thing called COVID that came up. And we said, all right, fine, we'll just hold off for a little bit, a couple of weeks until this COVID thing blows over. And, well, that didn't exactly play out that way. And so a few months later, we decided, look, we have all these speakers lined up. Why don't we do something about that? So we actually had those speakers Zoom in and make their presentation to us. But then we turned it right around and sent it out on our YouTube channel. Our YouTube channel now has over 13,000 subscribers to it. And in fact, actually, we did a YouTube session last night. Jeremy, our Livestream astronomer back here, did a YouTube observing stream of the supernova that's in Messier 101. Actually, that here, I'll walk over here so that people on the live stream can see it. Are you going to follow me? Oops. Oh, sorry. Maybe okay, here we go. There we go. So this is Messier 101, and I believe in this area right here, or right around here, there's actually a supernova that was just discovered a couple of weeks ago. And Jeremy put a camera on one of our scopes and did a live stream about it. So the live stream has been a great outreach vehicle for us, and we will continue to do that. What started out as just well, we got to do something, has now actually turned into a resource that's become very valuable. So let's get to tonight's program. Actually, as it turns out, tomorrow is going to be I think it's our 14th Rocket Fest. So families have already signed up, and they're going to build these Estes rockets, of which our speaker will talk a little bit about. As a matter of interest, is anybody here in the audience building a rocket currently and sending it up tomorrow? All right, excellent. So you're going to see what this can grow into very soon. So anyway, yeah. So tomorrow we will launch in excess of 110 rockets over the day, and we're really looking forward to that. It's a lot of fun. I hope you guys had a lot of fun putting it together, and we'll look forward to seeing how it does. So, am I missing anything, Jeremy? Is that pretty much covered? All right, let's get into this. Les Bradshaw has been doing rocketry for a long time, and he's been a great resource to us. Practically every one of our Rocket Fests, he brings up a small sample of the rockets that he brings and engages us in this. And this is actually our first time we've had you, Les, speaking here. We're looking forward to that. And so, without any further ado, Les Bradshaw.
Thank you. So again, my name is Les Bradshaw. During this presentation, I'm going to talk a little bit of history of the model rocketry, some stuff about model rockets, so you can understand some other stories when I tell them later about some of my history in doing model rocketry. So the birth of model rocketry. The first model rocket motor, commercial rocket motor, was developed by Orville and Robert Carlyle. They ended up reading an article in a Popular Mechanics by G. Harry Stein about how kids were injuring themselves trying to make their own motors. So they provided some of the motors to him to evaluate. He was a range safety officer at White Sands, and he devised the safety handbook for model rockets. He tried creating his own company to sell model rocket kits and contracted a pyrotechnics firm to manufacture the motors. Unfortunately, there were production issues. They weren't making deliveries, and reliability issues. So then he contacted Vernon Estes, who developed Mabel. Mabel was a pneumatically powered machine using compressed gas that could make low-cost motors, and Vern wanted to use the compressed gas instead of electric motors because with the black powder they didn't want to have any sparks to have any explosions. So he was able to start making low-cost motors with great reliability, and when G. Harry Stein's company kind of faltered, he then started marketing his own rocket kits in 1960, and Estes eventually dominated the model rocketry business. Here I've got examples of 3 of the first kits: the Scout, the Mark II, and the Space Plane. Several years ago, one of the companies actually did a special run of the Scout called the Golden Scout. They sold the kit relatively low cost. The idea was you built it, flew it, and then you got sent in proof, and then you got a certificate signed by Vern Estes. And my Golden Scout is on the table here. There are some national rocket organizations. The first one was the National Association of Rocketry, NAR, that got founded in 1957. NAR initially only supported low power rocketry in the beginning. They finally started expanding into high power, I think, in the 80s. But they do require you only get to use commercial motors, ones you can buy. Tripoli Rocketry got founded in 1964 by people who wanted to do bigger rockets. And so it was primarily geared towards high power and does allow for people to make their own motors. Ball Both organizations provide a level of insurance so long as you launch according to the safety code. They've got education, outreach, and hold various contests. There is a level of some cross certification between the two, so if you get a level 2 certification, which I'll explain later, through one, you can just contact the other one and get certified with them as well. The NAR holds a yearly national sport launch for people to come and fly. They also hold various other contests, which I'll get into a little bit later. And Tripoli holds what they call their LDRS, or Large Dangerous Rocket Ships. And about 10 years ago, Discover Channel contracted with them for like a 5-year period where they came and filmed the LDRS and then showed it on TV. And they have a safety code. In terms of contests, there's a national rocketry competition. In here, they'll have for different classes of rockets using different size motors, trying to get the highest altitude or the longest duration flight, and there's a big contest for craftsmanship, scale modeling. In fact, that goes international, and people from the US compete against other countries in terms of the craftsmanship. NAR also supports the American Rocket Challenge. It's for middle to high school students. Each year they set a new goal for the next year. They have to launch a single egg, retrieve it undamaged. They have to get to a specific altitude, and they get judged how much they miss it by, and a specific duration. And again, they get judged by how much they miss the time, too long or too short. They also support the intercollegiate rocket engineering competition for universities. There they have to launch an 8.8 pound payload. They are, depending upon the year, they have a target to achieve either 10,000 feet or 30,000 feet with that payload. And then other people have various other contests, some of which I'll discuss later. Besides the NAR and Tripoli, which are rocket organizations by rocket people, the National Fire Protection Association also created a set of rules to help cover rockets. And that's the NFPA 1122 for low power. And when you get into high power, it's then NFPA 1127. And even the FAA has created their FAR Port 101, which covers amateur rockets everywhere from low power to much bigger rockets. So I'm not going to go into great detail in the low power safety code. Just quick summary. For low power, lightweight, non-metal parts, cardboard tubes, balsa wood, plastic. Motors have to be certified commercially available, and you can't start modifying them. We use electric systems to ignite the motors and have interlocks to prevent a rocket from being launched accidentally. For some reason we go to launch a rocket and it doesn't launch. Some guidelines about waiting before you go up to it to figure out why. Launch safety, you have to have a countdown. For low power rockets, it's 15 feet away from the rocket. We start getting a little bit bigger, it gets 30, and we start getting up to these big ones. We sometimes have to be half a mile away. Rockets need to be guided initially when they're first launched. And so they call out for you to have launch rod, tower, or rail. It has to remain within 30 degrees of vertical. You can't launch it horizontal, try and make a bazooka out of a rocket. Again, for low power, rocket cannot weigh more than 53 ounces, so smidgen over 3 pounds, and does not contain more than 4.4 ounces of propellant. And can't use propellant that 320 Newton seconds of total impulse, and I'll get into that a little bit later. We can't launch the rockets into clouds, near airplanes, and you can't try and turn it into fireworks by trying to put gasoline or TNT in it to make it explode. Launch site, open area. There's table, and winds can't be greater than 20 miles an hour. All rockets have to have a recovery system, parachute, streamer, glide. There are some exceptions for some super lightweight rockets that can use a tumble recovery. And we're not going to try and recover our rockets from power lines or climb trees or whatnot and risk injuring ourselves. In this table, I'm not going to go through it in detail, it just shows for the different size engines what the minimum site dimensions need to be. So the concept is we want to keep rocketry safe. We don't want it to be mistaken for fireworks. We don't want people getting injured. So what is this line between low power and high power rocketry? When the rocket exceeds the definition of a low power model rocket in the 1122, it becomes a high power rocket, is controlled by the 1127. And that's if it uses a motor with more than 160 Newton seconds of total impulse, which is an H motor or more. And again, I'll explain this a little bit. Uses a motor with more than 80 Newton average thrust, exceeds 4.4 ounces of propellant. If the rocket itself weighs more than 53 ounces, including the motor, if the motor is designed to put out sparks, or it's a hybrid motor, and if any of the airframe is metal. So for high power, there's 3 levels of certification. Level 1 is using a high G or an H or I motor. You have to build, fly, and successfully recover the rocket using one of the appropriate motors. For level 2, that's J, K, and L. You have to have your L1 certification first. You have to pass a written exam with at least 85% or better, and build, fly, and recover the rocket using an appropriate motor. And level 3 is M and above. You have to be L2 certified, build, fly, and recover the rocket successfully, but you have to work with an L3 mentor. And you have to document, put together a full package on construction techniques, what materials you're using, how you're going to glue it and bond it, stability calculations, recovery system, how the parachute's going to eject, what electronics are you going to have in the rocket. And for clubs, there are 4 quote-unquote local clubs. The closest is up at Syracuse. It's northwest of Syracuse. So at least from my house, it's about an hour and 25 minutes. It's a NAR club, and it has a 3,000 foot waiver. So all the rockets have to stay under 3,000 feet. The upstate regional rocket group, URGE, is near Penn Yan. It's a little less than 2 hours from here. They're both NAR and EEE, so you can fly experimental motors as well. And they've got an 18,000 foot waiver, one of the highest in the Northeast. Monroe Astronautical Rocket Society, Mars, is in Geneseo. It's a little over 2 hours away. It's NAR only with an 8,000 foot waiver. And Metra is down in Pine Island. It's about 2.5 hours. It's Tripoli with a 4,500 foot waiver. I belong to Urge, by the way, but I've flown at all 4 of them in the past. So what is a model rocket? So the main parts of a model rocket is we have a nose cone, generally, a body tube, fins, and a launch lug. And inside we start having a shock cord, parachute, recovery system, or a streamer. There's wadding to protect the parachute, an engine block to keep the engine from trying to shoot up into the rocket. There may be centering rings that the motor tube is smaller than the body of the rocket, the motor tube itself, and a means to retain the motor in the rocket so it doesn't pop out. The flight profile of a model rocket is we start off with ignition, and the rocket starts lifting off, and then the motor burns out. And consider throwing a ball. You know, you're imparting energy into the ball, but you let go, but the ball keeps going. Same with the rocket. The motor burns out, but through momentum, the rocket keeps coasting upward. So it gets into this coast phase, and then hopefully near apogee, you'll have an ejection charge come out. Apogee is the highest point of the flight. That will put out your parachute or streamer to then allow for the safe recovery. For stability, you start off with what's called the center of gravity. That's a balance point of the rocket, kind of like an old seesaw. Where do you have to put the weights to have everything level out? Then you've got the center of pressure. Consider a weather vane. It wants to turn into the wind. Now instead, what if you were to move the pivot point of the weather vane to the point where the wind is equally blowing on the back and the front, and so it's not going to try and turn into or out of the wind. That point's the center of pressure. For a rocket to be stable, the center of gravity has to be higher, closer to the nose, than the center of pressure, because the rocket is going to, in the air, revolve around that center of gravity, and the center of pressure is lower. If it starts trying to tilt to the side, the air forces and the center of pressure will re-guide it back to go straight. Ways to ensure, and we want to try and have the center of gravity separated from the center of pressure by a minimum of 1 body tube diameter. So ways to do that is you can add weight up front in the nose cone, or make the body tube longer, or to move the CP further back, make larger fins, or sweep them towards the back. For the launch pad, includes a mean to guide the rocket. So it can have a rod, a rail, or a tower. Because initially the rocket's moving too slow for sufficient airflow across the fins. Again, consider that weather vane. If the wind's not blowing, you know, who knows what direction that vane's really pointing, because there's no wind to move it. So the launch pad guides the rocket until there's sufficient velocity for the fins to have enough aerodynamic forces to guide the rocket. The typical rule of thumb is it has to be moving at 30 miles an hour, which is 44 feet per second. So when they're launching rockets tomorrow, we'll have a launch pad with this rod. The rod's only about 3 foot long, and the rockets aren't totally at the bottom. We hit the button and that motor ignites. Within that less than 3 feet, that rocket's going from nowhere, nothing, to 30 miles an hour. So that gives you an idea what kind of accelerations these rockets see. And the blast effector in the bomb just helps prevent fires from having the thrust, the motor fire, melting the launch pad or setting any grass on fire. Model rocket engines. So most low power rocket motors use black powder. When you get into the higher power, they use ammonium perchlorate. It has a greater power density. Now, some companies have now started marketing some low power motors that use the ammonium perchlorate. So you've got propellant that's going to burn, gets the rocket moving. Then that burns out, and you've got a delay grain that burns during the coast phase, and it's going to burn for a specific length of time before the ejection charge goes off to push off the nose cone, push out the parachute or streamer, so the rocket can make a safe recovery. So in the bio-rocket engines, here's just some examples of some motors, A83, C63, D12.5. What does that mean? Well, basically every letter is 2x the impulse, or call it the whoosh factor, of the previous letter. So a B engine has twice the power of an A. A C has twice a B, which would make it 4 times an A. A D is twice a C, et cetera, et cetera. The first number, that, like in the A8, C6, is related to how fast the gases are coming out, the whoosh. And that's really what the average thrust is on the rocket. So how much power is going to push. And you can have a motor that has a low thrust and will burn for a long time, or a motor that has a high push but has a very short duration because there's only so much propellant. So you can either burn that propellant slowly or quickly to have more or less thrust. And the last number is the delay before the ejection charge to deploy. So like this D12, I can get a D12 3, 5, 7. Based upon how high I think the rocket's going to go, I'll try and pick the appropriate motor so that hopefully the ejection is going to occur at apogee. Not too early, not too late. Now in high power rockets, we start using electronics because the higher motors don't include ejection charges. So we use electronics instead to eject the parachutes. Two main types of altimeters are, one altimeter measures the atmospheric pressure, and it's looking to detect as the rocket goes higher, the air pressure gets lower and lower. And when the rocket hits apogee and starts coming back down, now the pressure starts increasing again. So it looks for that change from pressure decreasing to pressure increasing and says, I'm going down, hit the ejection charge. Some also use accelerometers that detect the change from positive acceleration to, again, negative acceleration. And there are some that actually use both. The altimeters with the atmospheric pressure are preferred over accelerometers because you could have a rocket start flying horizontally, in which case it's very difficult for it to detect the change. This is tends to cause controversy amongst people developing rockets. My preference is dual redundancy. I used to be an engineer at a company that makes flight control systems and everything's redundant. Some people with rockets don't feel it's worthwhile, but I'll typically use 2 units. One is primary, the other is secondary, and configure them to have a delay between the units. So the one will do it at apogee, and the second will go off like 1 second after apogee. So yes, we initiate a charge that will split the rocket in 2. And the goal there is to get the rocket to be tumbling, so it's falling quickly, say in 100 to 120 feet per second, but not coming in ballistically. And then when it gets to a lower altitude, a second charge will occur, typically somewhere in the 500 to 700 foot range. That'll put out the main chute, and that's going to slow the rocket down to 15 to 20 feet per second to now make a soft landing. And again, what you can do there is set one to go off at 700 feet, the other one to go off at 600 feet. So as an example, for my L3 rocket, here was an example of my electronics sled. Excuse me. So here was one unit that uses both atmospheric and accelerometer. This was a second unit by a different manufacturer. That one used a 9-volt battery that normally be held in with zip ties. Here's the end cap where I had the wires come out that I can hook in. And these canisters here, I would put some black powder in and have an electronic match. And when the altimeter detected I was at apogee, would send power to that match that would then ignite the powder that would then eject the parachute or split the rocket. Other electronics people put in, cameras. Estes actually sells a camera that is suitable for some low power rockets. I had a camera on my level 3. Someone nicely designed and machined a 3D printed a shroud to support the camera on the side of the rocket for me. And people put trackers in. The two main types of trackers are a GPS tracker that sends down GPS signals saying where it is. The other is an RF tracker that, think about some of the old movies where someone's waving a thing and they'll get beeps when they're pointing at the transmitter, and the beeps go away when they put off. And so it's a little more effort, but people still like to use them. The original trackers all tended to be these RF trackers. Only last 5-10 years have we started getting into the GPS. So hopefully that explains something about the rockets and whatnot. So my rocketry in my youth, 1960s and 70s. I grew up on Long Island, and for those of you who have never been there, no, it's not one great big city. Where I grew up, it was about as built up as Endwell. I was highly interested in math and science back then. I got to grow up witnessing the great space race, you know, going from Mercury to Gemini to the Apollo. And of course, getting to watch the first steps on the moon. Okay.
Houston, this Neil, radio check.
Try and save a little bit of time.
The opening I ought to have on the camera. Stand what?
There's that foot coming down.
There he is. There's a foot coming down the steps.
Okay, Neil, we can see you coming down the ladder now. Neil, we can see you coming. Okay, I just checked getting back up to that first step. That isn't collapsed too far, but it's adequate to get back up. Roger, we copy. It's a pretty good little jump.
So there's a foot on the moon, stepping down on the moon.
Actually,
If he's
not
touching
quite
that
yet.
first step, he must be stepping down on the moon at this point.
He's standing on the pad, landing pad.
10.
Buzz, this is Houston. F2, I'm at the 1/160th second for shadow photography on the sequence camera. Okay. I'm at the foot of the ladder. The LEM footbeds are only depressed in the surface about 1 or 2 inches, although the surface appears to be very very fine-grained as you get close to it. It's almost like a powder. Ground mass is very fine.
Boy, look at those pictures. Wow. It's a little shadowy, but he said he expected that in the shadow of the lunar module. Armstrong is on the moon.
Yeah,
Neil
step off the
Armstrong,
limb now.
38-year-old American, standing on the surface of the moon on this July 20th, 1969.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
So I got to watch that live when I was a kid. So I got my first rocket through advertisement from Boys Life Scouting magazine. I normally just went down to local school field, football field, and it was only about a 2-block walk, and flew my rockets there. But for special times, especially when I wanted to fly at what I considered bigger rockets then, my father would drive me to Roosevelt Field. It's the biggest mall in Long Island, second biggest in New York State, and 10th biggest in the U.S. But back then, there were the blue laws that outlawed Sunday sales of clothing, apparel, furniture, appliances, furnishings. So the mall was closed. So there was this huge parking lot with no cars in it. That gave me a great big space to launch in. The only bad point was instead of soft grass, I had hard asphalt for the rockets to land on. And sometimes security stopped by and started talking to us. We explained what we were doing. They'd watch a few flights, and then they'd go off and let us keep flying. So those were some interesting times. I built well over 24 rockets back then. Main rocket companies were Estes, Centuri, and MPC. Also built various other plastic models, and also did some of the balsa and tissue airplanes. I joined the NAR. I got excited when Estes first came out with their big D motor and came out with the Cherokee D rocket designed specifically for that motor. That was a real high flyer. That was one I would only risk launching at Roosevelt Field. Now, during high school, I did lose some interest due to other activities going on. And then while I was in college, our house got sold, and most of my childhood possessions evaporated. So all my rockets disappeared. That was basically the end of my rocketry involvement. Or was it? Now, I don't have pictures of my rockets from back then, but I did some searching and found online some old catalogs. These are some of the rockets I recall having. And some of these I have again. So now we get into my phase 2, my quarter century. So I graduated from college, got a job at what was GE then. I got sold to Martin Marietta, who merged to become Lockheed Martin, who then sold us to BAE. Meanwhile, I kept basically doing the same work in the same building. They just kept changing the front. Got married. We had 3 kids, 1 girl and 2 boys. Our daughter got involved in a week-long program to get girls interested in science and technology here at Kopernik. And one of the things they did is they built a model rocket. And then my oldest son also did a model rocket through the Scouts. So I recall doing rockets from my childhood and how much fun I had. So I purchased more rockets, some for them and some for me. The same activity lasted for a few months, 6 months, maybe 9, but they both lost interest. But I got the bug again. And here I am after 25 years of being a born-again rocketeer, as we refer to it. I've done outreach. I've done work with Boy Scouts, 4-H, Civil Air Patrol. I put up displays for Space Day and Kopernik Rocketfest, like tomorrow. I also invested in a rocket designer. I provided him some upfront funding. I suggested we buy some bulk pack rockets where we get various parts like nose cones, parachutes, shock cords, launch lugs, motor mounts, body tube. And he developed some of his designs based on those components. And some of those kits are still available today, being sold by a distributor. He paid me back the money. I fronted him with some additional. Plus, part of the agreement was I got a copy of every kit. I mentioned other contests, so I'm going to briefly discuss 2 contests I got involved with. So there was a website called the Essence Model Rocketry Reviews where people could post reviews of different rockets. Excuse me. So you had to select from one of 6 different pictures, design a flyable rocket that as closely as possible duplicated the picture, write a how-to article including pictures and templates as to allow others to build your design, submit the pictures, fly it, and name the spaceship. So scoring was 50% matching the picture, 15% flight score, 25% on the write-up, and 10% just best in group. I basically won due to the write-up portion. There was one person who, even I'll admit, his rocket was better, but he did a terrible job in writing up his how-to article, and that boost got me above him.
So it pays to pay attention in English.
So here are the 6 different rockets. I picked the one highlighted in blue. And this is the rocket I built. And I think it actually matched the picture pretty well. And then the Rocketry forum had what they called the Bag of Parts contest. So it was open to anyone to participate. You had to select a common household item and submit it. They were then going to take the list, and all the participants then had to use 75% of the items that are on the list, and they had to use the item they suggested. And they also said you had to use a dowel, but that didn't count as part of the 75%. Build and fly the rocket, generate a build thread on the rocket forum. I picked the Renews It air freshener. Others picked some foam core board, bottles, underwear, ice cream cone protector. One gave you a choice, umbrella or a jar lid, Pringles can, ping pong ball, dowels, cardboard candy wrapper. This is my rocket that I built. I used the Renews It as my nose cone, the Pringles can as the body tube, jar lid became the command center or cockpit. Made some pods out of the water bottles with some ping pong balls as landing pads. I used the foam board as the centering rings, put dowels on the ends of the wings, and I used the underwear as a chute protector. Fortunately, I also put wadding in because it burned right through that underwear, even though it's supposed to be fire resistant. There's also things called scratch building a rocket, bashing a rocket, and steampunk. So I have built various rockets based on my own design. This one I called That's Nuts. I took a big Easter egg, modified it, and the squirrels are the fins. A bash is building a rocket significantly different from the kit. So here is what the kit was supposed to look like. This is how I bashed it. Quite honestly, the reason for bashing it is I goofed. I was building the kit, and literally as I went to lay down in bed, it hit my mind saying, did I install that part correctly? And I'm thinking, well, the glue's dried now, so it won't make a difference. I'll check in the morning. In the morning, I discovered, yep, I made a mistake. I can't build the rocket to look like how it's supposed to. So I said, well, I'll just build another one, do it the right way, and this one I'm going to start bashing. So I started using, again, ping pong balls and made it different from how the kit was supposed to be. In steampunk, this rocket wasn't supposed to have all the rivets and stripes and whatnot. That was stuff I decided to add to the kit. Here's examples of some of my other scratch-built rockets. This one I call Skeletor. This green one is Nasher with the teeth using the tubes. And I refer to this last one on the far right as my eye-catching design, because you could see how it was catching eyeballs. I mentioned how Discovery Channel contracted for the LDRS, and at one of them got to meet Carrie Byron of the Mythbusters. And at the 2018 National Sport Launch, Vern Estes was there, founder of the Estes rocket. And here he is holding my Big Bertha rocket that he signed. Big Bertha was, he claimed, was his favorite design. And I had painted it to match one of the original paint schemes of the Big Bertha. That rocket is still being manufactured. It came out mid-60s, so it's been in production, 60 years. And they have changed the paint scheme and decals periodically to refresh it. But as I said, knowing that Vern was going to be there, I wanted to match one of the early paint schemes. So some statistics. By the way, this is another one of my scratch built. I call this one the Anti-ANSI. Again, as a design engineer, I was making equipment at the plant. We had a safety engineer that was constantly balking and insisting on warning labels. So I decided to make a rocket with all kinds of crazy warning labels on it and brought it in to show him. But over the 25 years, I've acquired 781 rockets, which is an average of a little over 31 a year. The rockets are from over 65 different manufacturers, many of which are now out of business. 377 of them are from Estes directly, so that's nearly half. But several of these other manufacturers basically sold copies, clones, of an Estes kit that they were out of production. So even though it's from rocket company X instead of Estes, it's still kind of an Estes kit. So if I include them, then over half the rockets I own are based on Estes designs. I've built 255 rockets, so I'm averaging about 10 a year. So doing the math means I still have 526 kits waiting. If I keep going at 10 a year, I better live another 50 years to get them all done. Plus, I got several ideas for more scratch builds of my own. I have flown 566 flights. So that's averaging over 2¼ flights per rocket. My most flown, this Explorer Aquarius, which was a kit, has flown 11 times. 19 rockets have been lost or destroyed on the field. When you get down to it, that's only a little over 3% of the flights. One thing about model rockets is if you're not willing to lose it, don't fly it. But if you don't fly it, it's just a model. It doesn't become a model rocket until it's actually flown. I also lost 7 in the flood of 2011. Water got in the basement. And 11 got built and donated, several to Kopernik. In fact, there's one hanging from this, and there's 2 over there. And some that I donated, I know they've flown and have lost. But not all went to Kopernik. I have started slowing down on my procurement last few years. I've gotten more selective in my rocket types. I prefer sci-fi, fantasy, odd rock. Try to avoid what is referred to generically as 3-fin nose cone, or it could be 4 fins. I started finding that, okay, you take the body tube, you glue the 3 or 4 fins on, maybe glue the motor mount in, and then you get to the next rocket, glue the 3 or 4 fins on, glue the motor. Next one, glue the 3. It's like it became too repetitive. So I've avoided trying to do that and have gone more, as I said, sci-fi, fantasy, odd rock. Some of the vendors that specialized in those type rockets have gone out of business. Plus, I do kind of recognize I've got a wee bit of a backlog, and it's like, do I really, really need that extra rocket? I do keep a Excel spreadsheet. I did discover I started having errors. I got rockets and forgot to add them, or I started building rockets and forgot to subtract them. The rockets were kind of disorganized. Basically, as they came in, I shoved them in the nearest hub. So I decided to empty the storage bins and reorganize, like here's the Estes rockets, here's the SimRock and whatnot. That was my build pile in 2016. When I laid this out, and I somewhat did it on purpose, but the doorway out of the basement's over here. So I blocked myself in the basement, so I had incentive to get at least so many rockets organized so I could get back out. If I remember correctly, there was about 460 some odd rockets back then. And I did a family photo back in my 10-year anniversary, which was back in 2008, where I had a little over 100 rockets. And last month, I decided to do a new family photo with my 219 rockets that I presently have. I did realize that 1 or 2 were like still in my shop because they need repair, so they're not quite every rocket is shown. I have some close-ups. I'll go discuss a few. People seem to get interested in the Pringles can that flies. Gary Larson in the Far Side once did a zigzag rocket. Someone actually made a kit to look like that, and even though the rocket is crooked, it flies straight. You sometimes have companies that make rockets similar but are upscales. This Venus lander, this top comes off and there's a little, comes down as a separate chute with a little Venusian passenger in there. There are things called upscaling or downscaling where the same rocket is built but in different sizes. This here is the original size rocket called the Trident. Then another company upscaled it to this size. Then another company wanted to outdo it and made a kit this size. Of course, have to have a Saturn V. You can see here in the background there's a rocket made out of styrofoam coffee cups. You can see here this is called the UFO, which is again a rocket made out of styrofoam coffee cups. I've got several Star Wars based rocket, Death Star, R2-D2. One thing I have done in the past when I'm flying by have control is I've used 2 launch pads. The Death Star separates, quote unquote, blows up into 4 pieces that they each come down. What I like to do is launch the Death Star and then immediately launch the X-Wing fighter, and then the Death Star blows up. They made it look a little bit different, and they don't call it the TARDIS, but basically a Doctor Who. Here's another example of original rocket, and this upscale is still in process, still needs to be painted. This is a scratch built using a candy dish for Halloween. I discussed a lot of these already. So there was a company, a gentleman who made special vinyl wraps that enhanced how the rockets looked. So I've got several rockets with his wraps on it. My build statistics, maximum I've built in any one year has been 20. Minimum, actually was last year, I only got 2 done. But I said the average is about 10, bringing me up to the 255. My major rockets, 3 of which are here. Phantom 4000, that's when my first composite motor. It was basically when I was scout leader and was getting some stuff for the troop. Went into, locally there was a GJ's Hobbies, and saw the big rocket with the big motor. It was an F motor. It was like, wow, I gotta have that. So then the aerial, which I actually brought with me, was my level 1 rocket. My level 2 rocket, which is also here, is called the Accelerator. Now it's the first rocket I made that used electronic dual deployment. And then laying across the table was the Ultimate Dark Star. I got my level 3 on that went over 9,000 feet. 9,360, I believe, is what the altimeter said. Now, again, by this time, I was trying to get away from the 3-fin nose cone. This rocket did have split fins, similar to the Accelerator, but that wasn't enough for me. So I modified it to add these red strakes and put these pods over the pins, just to give it a little bit more. What I call my signature rockets. I had the Big Bertha and my Explorer Aquarius. Got signed by Vern and his wife, Linda Estes. And Jim Fliss of Fliss Kits, who made the this kit, was very impressed how I had steampunked it. So I got him to sign it. By the way, these 3 rockets no longer get flown. L2 launch, I did not have a video camera, but through my regular camera, I did multiple shots and put this together, showing basically elapsed time of the launch. And just also give you an idea of motor comparison. So here is an ABC size engine. And we in rocketry do one thing weird. So this is an 18 millimeter motor that's 2.75 inches long. So we use a combination of metric and imperial units. Next to it is the D motor that's 24 millimeter and also 2.75 inches long. And the M motor for my L3, make sure you keep your eyes on those two motors. They're there. But that is the casing for my M motor. It's 98 millimeters and about 2.5 feet long. Now, by the way, people talk about trackers. I actually miswired one of my altimeters. So the one altimeter was properly set up to set off the charge at apogee and do the main at a lower altitude. But the other one got them reversed. And so my main chute came out at apogee. And this is basically showing the GPS track until it got so far away, I lost connection. The rocket actually ended up here, 3 miles away. And this is my L3 launch, as seen from the rocket. The apogee parachute, but you can start seeing it's a little wacky because the main chute also came out, so it's hanging down with the main chute up above it with the drogue chute down below. Now, one thing I was always amazed at is the rocket itself had 6 fins. I put on the pods, I added 12 strakes. If you notice, there was very little rotation going up. So I must have aligned everything just right to keep it going straight. Yeah. Now a lot of people ask me, where do I store my rockets at home? I do have, here's some of the shelves I have in the basement. I do have to kind of like a Tetris fit them all together with the fins. You'll even see some here are standing nose down with the fins up towards the top so that they better fit together. The big ones I keep in my garage, and then I got a few stashed in other miscellaneous places around the house where Liz, my wife, won't find them. She knows I have a lot. She doesn't know exactly how many. But enough of me. Just want to say I'm not the craziest person doing rockets. In 2009, a guy built a 1/10 scale Saturn V. It held the record for being the largest, tallest, and heaviest amateur rocket ever that successfully launched. 36 feet tall. Weighed over 1,600 pounds, and it flew to over 4,000 feet. If I remember correctly, he had a central P motor. So this is an M. N is twice as more. O would be twice more. P would be twice again. So it's 8 times more bigger and powerful than mine. Plus he had 6 P motors around that central, and no, sorry, 6 N motors around the central P.
Stevie's Saturn V model rocket.
7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, ignition!
Charges separating it, putting out various power shapes. This video doesn't show it, but this main first stage of the Saturn V landed standing upright. Yeah, you can see how it's coming down. Maybe they do catch it.
Oh man, that was just totally awesome. Did you see how that thing landed upright? Fantastic.
But not to be outdone, in 2018, another person built a 3/4 scale Mercury Redstone. 64 feet tall, weighed 1,000 pounds. I couldn't find what altitude it actually achieved. Their simulation said it was going to get to 3,800 feet.
One, ignition. Godspeed, John Glenn. Woo! Okay, we got the up part. That's the easy part. Let's see about. All right, there's an event. It's coming apart. Look at that. All right, we've got a booster undershoot. We've got the main section undershoot. We've got the tower undershoot, and we've got the capsule undershoot. Ladies and gentlemen, you have just witnessed a world record. The largest scale model rocket on Earth.
That was flown on a single Q motor. And in discussions on the rocket forums, there are others that have talked about how they've built 400 or 500 rockets over their lifetime and have literally thousands of kits in storage. So my 500 kits in storage and building, 255, I'm up there, but I'm not the worst. So does anyone have any questions?
We can get the people on the live stream to hear.
You talked about how your rockets either use black powder, which is essentially what they put in bullets, or ammonium perchlorate.
Right.
Now, ammonium perchlorate's the oxidizer, so you got to put something else in there to oxidize. Would that be aluminum powder?
I'm not 100% certain because, they always reference the motors as having the ammonium perchlorate.
It's a combo that has some powdered metal in it.
I don't make my own motors. I only purchase commercial motors, so I'm not certain of the exact chemical compositions. I know they also put different things in. You can buy motors that put out red, blue, green, yellow, different flames.
Elements. That's like that's what fireworks people do.
Right.
Now the launches you showed us there, those rockets got off the ground way faster than the big boys we see on TV. It's just a matter of scale, maybe, or what?
Right. Well, also, again, most of the you take a Saturn V or a SpaceX rocket, they've got gimbaled motors, they've got the flight controls to keep it steady. We don't have those, so we rely on having the fins and the aerodynamics, so we have to get up to speed a lot faster to get the stability from the air against the fins.
Any other questions here? Oh, who had a question? Oh, I'm sorry.
What was the biggest one that you ever made, and how much powder did you use so that you can launch it into the air?
Okay, so this black one here on the table was my biggest rocket I've built and have flown. If I okay, so this is the biggest that I've built and flown. You can see this rocket next to it is taller. It's thinner, but it's taller. That one is still in the build cycle. It has not flown yet. It does not take as big a motor, so it actually will not go as high as my level 3 rocket. So.
Right, I've got a question. I know that STs and probably some other rocket manufacturers make multi-stage rockets.
Yes.
So I've seen 2-stage rockets. Occasionally we've launched those here. Are there commercially any more than the 2-stage?
There are commercial 3-stage rockets. I have actually seen someone who flew a 4-stage, but the 4-stage was a high-power rocket, so they had electronics with interlocks that if the rocket was... One of the problems you get into with the multi-stage is the rocket can start tipping over, and you can get to the point where when the next stage launches, it's flying horizontal or going down. So with the high-power multi-stage, they'll actually monitor how much tilt there is, and if they determine that the rocket is tilted too far, they won't ignite the next stage.
That's wise, yeah. Interesting.
But Estes makes a 3-stage rocket.
All right. Jeremy, do we have any questions on the...
There's a person back there.
Oh. Okay, hold on. There we go. Here's another in-house question.
I was just curious, what is your design process like when you're coming up with scratch builds in some of the more original rocket designs?
I don't know. I just come up with different ideas. Like one rocket, as at the anti-ANSI, I was trying to make a joke with the safety inspector. I have another rocket. Again, our company makes the computers that fly airplanes. I specifically was involved in developing the test stands to test those computers. They're typically gray or blue or black cabinets, and I said, we need to add some pizzazz. We should make one of these test consoles hot neon pink with metallic green trim. Management would never go with me, so I decided to build a rocket that was going to be hot pink and metallic green colors.
It makes it easy to find.
Yep. The eye-catching design, I want to do something making use of the eyeballs, and as I was designing it, I ran into issues, like initially the fins were too flimsy, so it's like, okay, let me add this on it to stiffen them up or to shorten the length. And so I had to make various design changes along the way. Some are just random. I mean, this is one of my scratch builds. I want it to be more like 50s with the landing struts. The portholes are water bottle caps that I sanded down and painted and glued on. So some I have a rough idea and then work on it as I'm going. For my level 2 rocket, I used a motor. Excuse me. The Estes rockets motors come complete, cardboard tube with the propellant in it. My level 3 motor, I purchase a metal case and I have to load the propellant slugs into it. One company came out with a high power disposable motor system that used a fiberglass casing and didn't require the metal tube. They came in a round tube, and I said, I want to do something with that. And I said, I also want to commemorate getting my level 2. So I took the tube that the motor came in, added fins, made small replicas of that rocket and put it on there, and had the various pictures posted on the fins and the body, and I called it my level 2 tribute. Just real quick, let me see if I can find it. There are times I do think I have too many rockets.
I see the corn cob on the right hand side there.
Yep, and the pig. Oh, here it is. So here's the shipping tube. On the side here are the little miniature rockets, and the pictures on the fins was my tribute. I will admit most of the rockets are kits. So of the 225 I've built, well over 200 are from kits. I do want to, there's a company that makes rockets using square tubes instead of round tubes. I actually want to take this trident. I want to try making my own triangular tubes to make a triangular trident. So like here's an example of one of their square tube rockets. So Pringles can, I mean, that was just, hey,
It's round.
I gotta
and
make a use of this Pringles can.
All right, do we have any other questions here? Or on, or here, okay.
What rocket was the most challenging to build and fly?
I'd have to say the Saturn V, being scale, was one of my more challenging ones. Probably the next one was my eye-catching design, because I had to keep modifying the design to improve it as I went along. So those two I'd say were probably my most challenging.
Interesting. You'd think the biggest rocket would be the challenging one. But.
I mean, again, it's big, but it's almost a 3-fin nose cone. You know, it's had to glue the fins on the side. I mean, a lot of the rockets, when you get, especially get bigger, use what they call through the tube mounting. So the fins go through the outer tube and then mount to the motor tube. And that adds a lot of strength. So getting some alignment for that is important, but I would take foam board, cut out templates, make jigs to secure and hold it while the epoxy was curing to keep everything nice and straight. And again, you saw in that video of my L3 flight, I must have done something right to keep it straight.
All right. Any other questions? Oh, here you go.
In all these decades of making rockets, did you ever get into sort of adjacent types of hobbies like airplanes, gliders, drones, other flying objects?
When I was young, I did do the rubber band powered balsa tissue paper planes. I rarely could get them balanced right to fly properly. So I wanted to get into RC back then, but in that time frame, RC was just too expensive.
And by RC, you mean
radio
controlled, yeah.
Yes. I mean, the transmitter servo receiver sets back when I was a kid were $500 to $1,000, and you know.
That was real money back then.
Yeah, that's still real money now.
All right, unless there's any other questions. One thing I was going to actually comment on, a movie that I saw a number of years ago. It's called October Sky. It was actually based on a real-life person, Homer Hickam. And he actually talks about building, literally model rockets from scratch. Homer Hickam ultimately ends up becoming a rocket engineer and worked at the Kennedy Space Flight Center. So if you haven't seen October Sky, it's definitely worth checking that out. Either on, I'm not sure if it's on Netflix or you can go to the library or something and pick it up. But it's a good watch. It's a good watch. Jeremy, unless there's any other questions from the live stream. All right. Well, Les, thank you so much. This was just fantastic.
Thank you.
It's clear how much you love the hobby and enjoy sharing it with us, and so we appreciate that, and look forward to having our rocket engineers come up tomorrow with their rockets, and hopefully you'll have good luck as well. And so, as it turns out, again, especially if this is your first time here to visit Kopernik, you cannot leave until you look through a telescope. All right. So we have the moon in our 6-inch telescope, and I think we're going to have Venus is also should be available. And so before you leave, you got to head out the doors, take a left, and head into the observatory. So thanks again, and we will see. Oh, next week is actually our talk is going to be about beginning telescopes. So there was actually a call for that on one of the more recent chats, and so Art Castiola of the Kopernik Astronomical Society will be doing a talk on beginning telescopes. So if you either thinking about getting a telescope or you've got a scope and you're not quite sure how to use it, come on up here next Friday. All right, thanks again.